Welcome everyone, I'm Christine, and as I just said, this is our fourth week in this journey, and if you've been with us, we have been looking very deeply at resiliency, what it means to be resilient, how to cultivate resilience. And I want to start today a little bit differently. We're actually going to start with a practice, a guided meditation. And in this meditation, we're going to be focusing on the 5 C's of resilient coping. So as we're meditating, we're just going to be sort of touching down and into those qualities that make for a resilient person. When we come out, I'll review those, and we're going to bring this entire 4-week journey in terms of the teacher talks to a close. Okay? So I want to invite you to mute yourselves if you're not muted. And you can take this meditation from a seated position. And as always, you're invited to rest on your backs if you'd like. Sometimes I like the experience of experiencing meditation while I'm laying down. Not very often, but sometimes it's just what I need. So there's always that invitation, especially in these sessions and especially at this time. So I want you to find yourself in that comfortable position, whether it's seated or lying down. And again, as always, you're always invited to close your eyes or to keep them open. It's completely up to you. If you're seated, let's take the feet hip width apart so that there isn't anything crossing in the lower body. If you're seated, just allow those hands to rest on the thighs. If you're laying down, you can allow those hands to rest on the belly or very comfortably at your side. If you're lying down and you really want to go into a state of surrender, I invite you to flip your palms so that the palms are facing up. We're going to just take the first few moments, guiding the awareness to the breath just as it is. Taking our focus and our concentration to the sensation of the breath as you inhale, and the sensation of the breath as you exhale. Maybe just noticing how the breath is showing up for you right now. With your next exhalation, I want you to feel the shoulders start to soften down and away from the ears. And on the next exhalation, I want you to feel a dropping down and into your seat. If you're lying down, a dropping down and into whatever surface is supporting you. With each exhalation, imagine that the entire system is softening. The body and the mind softening. And for the next few moments, touching into that first C, calm. What does calm feel like right now? If calm is present, where is it residing right now? Imagine that your own awareness is like an inner traveler, allowing the awareness now to travel up into the space of your own mind. Maybe imagining that the mind is like a clear blue sky, stretching in all directions, no beginning, no end, no sense of there being any boundaries or edges. And for the next few moments, allowing yourselves to touch into clarity. An unclouded, unveiled mind. Awareness can be like a traveler. Allow it to move now down and into the space of your heart. Maybe allowing those shoulders to drop just a little bit more. As you imagine a softening across the space of the heart. So that the space of the heart becomes as vast and as expansive as the sky of your mind. Allowing yourselves to touch into the experience of full connection. Which happens from the space of the heart. Awareness travels downward now into the space of the solar plexus and even the belly. This place of your will, your motivation, this space of your competence. This space of fire. Moves you forward with confidence. For the next few moments, see if you can feel into the strength of your own back, and at the same time, the softness of the front of your body. Just visiting the place of courage. Strong back, soft front. Strength and vulnerability. And very gently, guide yourself right back to the space of the heart. Just noticing that with each exhalation, that space can stretch a little bit more, soften a little bit more. Just taking a little bit of a dive into compassion. And whenever you're ready, just take the awareness back to your breath. Spending just the last 30 seconds or so in quiet. And whenever you're ready, but only when you're ready, open your eyes, letting the light back in and coming back into this day. If you're here in the Northeast, it's a very, very sunny day, and we're so grateful for all of the light. So that was about a 7 to 10 minute guided meditation where we had the opportunity to sort of drop down and into, again, what Laura Graham calls the 5 C's of resilient coping. These are a very useful tool whenever you want to check in with yourself and ask, where am I at in terms of the 5 C's? Because they can give you a sense of the strength of your own resiliency, which can waver depending on the situation that you're in or the challenges that you're facing, and also give you a good indicator of which of these qualities need some time in the gym. If you remember, we talked about resiliency at the very beginning as a musculature of sorts, right? We defined it as a set of capacities that allow us to really face with a lot of confidence, to really meet and to respond to pressures, challenges, stressors, tragedies, crisis, and trauma very awake and in a way that's very adaptive, very flexible, and very effective. So resiliency is not about just bouncing back from whatever it is that you're facing. It is a set of capacities. And you may remember early on in our journey, I talked about this idea that we're born hardwired for resiliency. All the wiring is there. It's almost like we're born with bicep muscles. It's there, right? The musculature is there. The strength of the musculature, however, the strength of the bicep muscle is really contingent upon how often I work it, how often I use it, how often I feed it, how often I nurture it. And resilience is the same way. Remembering that although we have that strong survival instinct, which is connected to our resilience, that only takes us so far. The kind of resiliency that we need to navigate increasingly complex lives is really contingent upon our thinking about our resiliency as musculature, that we can grow and nurture and evolve. So I always want you to keep that in mind. This aspect of resiliency actually lives in the part of the brain where emotional intelligence lives. And that's the part of the brain that's very, very malleable. And we're grateful for that. It's not rigid. You know, it's not as if we are born with only a certain amount of resiliency and that's it. Or we should never hold the attitude that someone is either resilient or they're not. It's not true. Regardless of our age or stage in life or even our situation, we all have the capacity to build our resiliency, to train ourselves up in it. So the 5 C's: calm, clarity, connection. We spent a lot of time over the last 4 weeks on connection. We talked about competence and we talked about courage in Monday's session. But I also mentioned to you that there is a 5th or a 6th C. I believe there's a 6th C. And that 6th C is compassion. And we sort of started to talk about or to take a deeper dive into what it means to see compassion as an expression of your resiliency. But before we come back into that content, because we didn't quite finish it on Monday, I want to also introduce you to this idea that resiliency is also very, very much tied to your own mindset. And it occurred to me that this is important to add into this unit on resiliency, because very few of us ask the following questions, these two questions that are here on the slide. And the questions are, how do you think about how you think? And what do you think about what you think? In other words, what is your general mindset about how the mind works? This idea about being very conscious and intentional about how we think about how we think and what we think about what we think can be a real game changer. Because generally speaking, there are two ways that we tend to think about the mind and the capacities of the mind. And these two ways that I'm about to introduce to you, if you don't know them already, come from the work of Carol Dweck. Now, there are a lot of people that have talked about mindset, but Carol Dweck's work really addresses what she has identified in a very, very specific way. The difference between what it means to have a fixed mindset and what it means to have a growth mindset. The more that you can live and connect, relate, the more that you can pursue things, the more that you can work to accomplish goals, the more that you can navigate crisis from the perspective or from the mindset that is linked to growth, the more energy you will have, the more vitality you will have. In other words, growth mindset always supports resiliency musculature, strong resiliency musculature. So this is an opportunity for you to think about how you think. What is my mindset about my mindset? I love this image that demonstrates fixed and growth mindset. And I want to give a little bit of focus on these, starting with the fixed mindset, because it probably won't surprise you that the majority of people in our lives are living from a fixed mindset, and to some degree, we ourselves might be living from a fixed mindset. And we might be living out of a fixed mindset too, in reference to certain people or certain relationships or certain things that we're doing or trying to do. Some of the statements that someone with a fixed mindset might make are, I give up really easily. My potential is really limited and it's predetermined. Every time I fail, my failure is an expression of how limited my abilities are. My intelligence is static. It doesn't have a lot of room for growth. I tend to avoid challenges. I like to stick to what I know. Feedback and criticism almost always feels personal to me. I will never improve. I'm either good at something or I'm not. And if I hold that thought and that belief, I'm either good at something or I'm not, what's the point of trying? So what I can tell you about a fixed mindset is that it is rigid, it is constricted, it's rooted in fear, it promotes a lot of anxiety, it's exhausting, it's depleting, it's very diminishing. If I work and operate from this mindset, I likely hold a very diminished sense of myself. And it's very limiting. It really limits what I can do and who I can be. Growth mindset. I really enjoy trying new things. I can learn to do new things. Failure are always opportunities for new growth. Intelligence can be grown and cultivated. I can embrace challenges because I know that they're going to help me to grow. I learn from feedback. I don't avoid it. I keep trying and I never give up. I'm inspired by others, especially their success, and my mistakes help me to grow. Another key sort of sentiment of a growth mindset is, I know that this is going to help me even though it feels really difficult. So these are what these two mindsets look like. If I'm living from a growth mindset is very open. There's a lot of flexibility in growth mindset. Growth mindset is one that is very curious, very courageous. There's a lot of ease, there's a lot of wonder. It's very invigorating to live from a growth mindset. It adds to my life, it enhances my life, as opposed to limits my life. So there are two very, very different ways in which we think about the mind, and the way that we think about the mind and our capacities starts to impact everything that we do, starts to impact how we live, the decisions we make and don't make, the risks we take and don't take, the degree to which we will love or withdraw. I mean, it's very monumental. So I like to show this slide because it gives you a sense of sort of the inner conversation or the kind of talk that happens in both of these mindsets. So again, a couple of other things to add to these mindsets. The fixed mindset, again, those who live from a fixed mindset tend not to take challenges. They will shy away from them, will often shy away from things that they don't know or are not familiar. Very, very difficult to handle criticism or feedback. They often will not carry out any action unless they feel like they have a lot of approval or even permission. Very, very focused on proving oneself, very threatened by the success of others. Effort, really, really efforting and working very, very hard at something is not considered a fruitful activity, and can give up very easily. So in just the things that I described, even in the description of it, there's just sort of this very, very low negative energy, because a fixed mindset drains us. If I'm living every day out of a fixed mindset, if it's part of just the way I operate, I can promise you that my capacity for resilience is very low, very weak. So just by working on changing the mind and how we think about the capacities of the mind is a wonderful strategy that you can utilize to strengthen your resilience. I view this challenge as an opportunity. Those people that you know who right now facing the challenge of this global pandemic, although they may have moments where they're feeling depressed or blue or just anxious and overwhelmed, they also might have moments where they think, my God, there is an incredible opportunity right here. That's growth mindset. I acknowledge and I embrace that I've got weaknesses and I know what they are. And I don't stop there. I want to strengthen those things that show up in my life as weaknesses. Tell me how I can do it better. What do you see happening here? Give me feedback. Give me constructive criticism. I want to know what you observe about my performance, about my way of relating, to make me better. Intelligence is considered not static and fixed and finite, but rather infinite, and dynamic and ever-changing and evolving. A growth mindset, an individual who lives out of a growth mindset will see the importance of learning, that learning will always trump social approval. They're very inspired and motivated by the success of people around them, even if they're doing similar things. They understand that all failures are opportunities to grow. So if I'm operating out of a growth mindset, every time I stumble and fall, I'm getting back up again. And I'm getting back up again and asking, what did I just learn? So I may experience losses, but I never lose the lesson. That's growth mindset. And growth mindset is persisting even in the face of lots of different setbacks. Growth mindset really is an expression of resilience. If you remember that opening image that I used to begin this entire series of the daisy that's coming up through cracks in the concrete, despite all kinds of obstacles and challenges, somehow that piece of greenery, somehow that living thing was able to push itself up and come into full expression against a number of different odds because it persisted. So in a lot of ways, growth mindset is a manifestation of resilience. So I wanted to put that out here for you as something else that you can add to your toolkit, something that you can think about when you're thinking about your own resiliency: calm, clarity, connection, competence, courage, and mindset. How am I thinking about how I think? What am I thinking about what I think? Am I fixed right now, or am I living from growth? And most of us tend to vacillate between these two mindsets, but when you know about this, when you can make this distinction, this isn't something that you're going to quickly forget about. You can check in with yourself 3 times per day and ask, out of what kind of mind am I navigating right now? When I'm confronted with a difficult decision or a very stressful challenge, what mindset am I moving myself through this challenge with? And what kind of results are occurring because I'm initiating out of either of these mindsets? And by the way, you can't live in both. It's one or the other. But remember, fixed, we're always going to feel anxious, depleted, weakened in terms of our resilience. Growth, we're always going to feel incredibly open, ready, embracing, and strong. A growth mindset will strengthen your resilience. So we began talking about the missing C, what I feel is the missing C in all of this, which is compassion. We started to talk about this toward the end of our session on Monday. And I mentioned, again, making a distinction between compassion, sympathy, empathy. Compassion literally means to suffer together. Compassion involves 2 things. It involves my having an awareness of the suffering of another person or a group of people. And my also simultaneously having a very, very strong desire to do something about it, to alleviate the suffering. So those are the 2 parts of compassion. What we know about compassion training, because again, compassion lives in that part of the brain where it can be grown, like emotional intelligence, is that when I train for compassion, it allows me to reach a really interesting state of being where both my heart and the working of my mind can navigate together, and I can face whatever is in front of me in a way where I feel very aligned with the head and the heart, with my thinking and my feeling. And I can make decisions in a way that the heart is always involved. Compassion training can lead us to a place where we bring both the mind and the heart into a place where we can easily slip into perspective taking, remembering that perspective taking is a high form of emotional intelligence. And what it means is that I have the ability to have a sense of what other people are thinking and feeling and believing, and an understanding of why it is they're thinking and feeling and believing that way. Because I can sort of put myself into their position, or I can put myself into their minds and into their hearts. This is a lot of cognitive flexibility, cognitive agility that many of us don't have. We don't have access to that kind of higher order thinking, perspective taking, when we're in a really flooded, overwhelmed frame of mind. The more you train for compassion, the more you begin to see that you're starting to lean into your difficulties as opposed to running away from them. And the best way that I can boil that down is to say that you're not as afraid of the difficulties and the challenges that might be coming or that are before you right now. And as a result, compassion training creates or cultivates within you a new level of trust in your own resources. And when you can navigate through your life, relationships, and a difficult global situation in such a way that you really trust that you're going to be okay because you have the tools to face what's difficult. There's nothing quite like that kind of trust. It's really powerful. When we build our compassion musculature, we become very flexible in our brain. When we can be soft and not so defended in the heart, we actually free up space in the brain. So we can find resolutions to problems. We can problem solve and make decisions and feel more flexible about it. We tend to be more accepting of those people and those situations that we're not able to change. And that's a lot of freedom. That creates a lot of freedom. And self-compassion, which is going to be a very important part of our steadiness series, which starts on Monday, really works to strengthen our resiliency musculature. The benefits of compassion training create a very calm and alert frontal cortex. You can count on that. The more I train in the region of the heart space for compassion, we visited that space during our opening meditation, the more I'm going to find that I have access to that inner CEO office of my own brain, and that I can be there in that office making decisions that feel that they're coming from a very calm, focused, and alert place. Compassion training helps me to stay connected to myself and connected to others. And this is a really important distinction. When I'm connected to others and not connected to myself, there is something that's missing in that connection. It just doesn't feel the same. I know you've all had the experience of feeling very, very connected intrapersonally and simultaneously interpersonally. When that happens, there's sort of a fullness and a richness to relationship that's really beautiful. And the more I can stay in my body, connected to me, the more I can stay in my heart, connected to what I'm feeling, and connected to you. Again, there's just this almost an ascension in who you can be together relationally. We often think about relationships deepening, and that can happen too. But I also like to think about relationships ascending. Like, what does it mean to take a relationship to a different level? Part of how you can do that is by remaining connected to you and to the other person simultaneously. Benefits of compassion training. I am able to perceive situations, assess, make a judgment that can then inform my action in a way that I can really trust. Therefore, I can mobilize quickly. I can decide what it is that I need to do, even in a crisis, and then I can act in a skillful manner in ways that I can trust, as opposed to getting really stuck in competence. Remember what we said last time. Our competence is compromised every time resiliency is low and the presence of self-doubt starts to enter into our orbit. So compassion training has so many benefits that go beyond, your ability to feel compassion for other people. So if I had to summarize it all, it's right here in this slide. If I really train up and strengthen and really open my capacity for compassion, I can know that I will be able to perform at a high level. I will be able to take actions swiftly and sanely. I can be self-aware. I can connect meaningfully with other people. And the entire time that I'm doing all of that, I can stay connected to my heart. So this sense that, wow, I'm living from my head so much of the time. And then there's these other periods of time that feel like rare exceptions where I'm completely living from the heart. That kind of experience, that kind of disconnect starts to become the exception as opposed to the rule. As someone who spent so much of her life in academic training, in graduate school, and then so many years in academia, I lived from here up. And I was surrounded by people who were living in the same way. This is one of the reasons why during that time, yoga especially was so important to me, because it helped me to get connected to my body. And it really took meditation, especially the heart-based meditation practices, what we call the metta practices. It really took those practices and working with them for many years to really understand that everything that I say on this slide is true. And this really comes from me and my own experience, that the benefits of accelerating and enhancing your capacity for compassion really does allow you to work at a much higher level, swiftly and sanely, that I can be self-aware, other-aware, very aware of connection, and have this heart present in all of it. That's the promise and the beauty of compassion training. What does compassion look like in action? How does it look embodied? How does it sound? How is it expressed? And the content that is on this slide, again, really comes from the work of Doctors Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer, who primarily do a lot of work in the area of self-compassion. And they write that if you want to, or they suggest that if you want to proactively be out there in the world as embodied compassion, you do it through your presence. So you want to think about, how is my body navigating through this room as I'm about to give a presentation in a way where compassion is being expressed? How is my body coming into this potential conflict with you from a compassionate place? How am I coming into the role as teacher from a place where compassion can be present? So how is it moved through in a very somatic bodily way? How is it conveyed in presence? And another way that you can think about this is, what is the energy of compassion? Because you know what it feels like when you're in the presence of a person who is just radiating compassion in your direction, and how that makes you feel. So start thinking about, how is that person looking at me? How were they touching me? Because compassion can be conveyed through touch. Neff and Germer tell us that compassion can be vocalized. What is the vocal tone of compassion? When you know that you're being compassionate, because you can just feel it to the core of your being, you will notice that your tone of voice is different. Your volume is likely different. Your cadence is likely different. Volume, tone, cadence belong to a category of expression called your paraverbals. Paraverbal communication is how you express, not the what, but the how. How are you speaking the words? And what we know about paraverbal communication is that as human beings, most of our attention is on that. We are mostly paying attention to the energy with which you are expressing as opposed to what you're expressing. In other words, you may have someone in your life that you know is really, really good at the vocalization of peace and compassion. And you say, you can call me and you can read the dictionary to me, and I will feel compassion in that. And I will feel love, and I will feel peace in that. So they really recommend compassion expressed through bodily energy, soothing touch, vocalization, and then your words. Being mindful of the words that you speak. Do I speak in ways that elevate and inspire? In ways that convey connection and wanting to be connected, and if necessary, convey my sincere desire to help or to be of service. So if you wanted to look at the way that compassion looks like in action, here it is. It's in your body, it's in your touch, it's in your vocalization, it's in the words that you choose to speak. So compassion and we all know this, is almost always expressed in our service, the things that we do. But let's look a little more deeply, and let's think about compassion beyond what we do and who we're being, so that it can become a more regular part of who you're being. What does any of this have to do with resilience? What this has to do with resilience is that if you can, on a more regular basis, embody compassion through your presence, through touch, through vocalization, in your conversations, you give the system a break. You actually revitalize the system. The more you can occupy a stance of compassion. When we are constricted, restricted, shutting down, ready to fight, ready to run, freezing, just overwhelmed by the stress response, we are not in the space of compassionate energy. All of that, what I just described, depletes, compromises our immune system, compromises the functioning of the most important parts of our body, our hearts, our organs, our glands, all of it creates all kinds of emotional turbulence. So the more I can be compassionate in the way I'm describing here, not in just what I do, but in who I am, the more I can begin to build all the reserves that I need to call upon for those moments when I am in crisis. In other words, practicing compassion is a way that you proactively build your resiliency. I want to leave you with one final exercise before we bring today's session to a close. If you're writing, I want you to put your pen down, and I want you to take your fists and I want you to just squeeze them as tight as you can. And I want you to feel restriction, constriction, even if you can bring to mind an image of the last time that you were just really charged up with anxiety or frustration or anger or whatever it is. Have your fists be expressing that right now. Right now, have them express that, holding, and now, very, very slowly, open the palms. Open the palms wide, but relaxed. Notice the difference in the energy of restriction and the energy of letting go. Now, with the eyes closed, extend your arms out as if you are getting ready to embrace this entire suffering planet. And feel the difference in your own energy as you moved from clenched fists, open palms, open arms. And then finally, bring the hands to the heart. And open your eyes. So Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer tell us that those last 3 steps, the open palms, I'm here to serve and I'm here to receive. The open arms, I'm here to hold. You'll notice that the opening of the arms just creates this big expansion through the chest. And then the hands over the heart. I'm also here to care for me. Those 3 gestures will fast track you into what compassion feels like. So it's amazing to sit on your cushion and to do the heart-based meditations and the metta practices, and those are so important, but sometimes I need to fast track myself. So part of your compassion training can be just what we did. Spending a few moments with the open hands, the open arms, the heart. And at the end of that, just a few minutes in each of those spaces. That's embodied compassion. Very different from this, which is where so many of us have been over the course of the last 5 weeks, myself included, and sometimes have been for a very long time. So we come to the end. Steadiness. Monday and Wednesday of next week, we begin our unit on steadiness. We'll finish up this week in some really exciting ways. You'll be back tomorrow with Jen and her practice to support this final week of resilience. And then on Friday, we're going to have this amazing, I just know it's going to be amazing, this interview with Ty Powers. So please join us for that. And again, think about compassion as being the missing C, and a really, really important one. And just sort of use that as your contemplation over the course of the next couple of days. All right? I'll see you then, Monday. Take good care.